Sometimes the letters and artifacts of the past need our help. While most of the books and papers in our libraries are in good shape and can stand up to years of continued use, some are fragile and can't be used. When something fragile is historical or irreplaceable, occasionally a library or archives will call in a conservator to repair and strengthen the artifact. This treatment process should only be undertaken by someone who has completed extensive study in the field. Before beginning a treatment, the first step is to conduct a detailed examination of the document. This is when a conservator determines the material components of the document and records its condition. Only after this examination can a conservator recommend an appropriate treatment. When Sam Houston wrote this letter, he probably used iron gall ink, which is typical of the 1830s. To confirm this, however, we will test for the presence of iron by treating it with a mixture of chemicals that will cause the brown-black ink to turn a brilliant blue if iron is present. This is what we call a destructive test because it requires us to actually remove a fiber from the letter. However, to minimize damage, everything will be done under the microscope, so the sample remains invisible to the naked eye. First, we will use a tungsten needle to remove a paper fiber that is covered with ink. The fiber is positioned on a glass plate. First, we treat the sample with droplets of a dilute solution of hydrochloric acid, and then we treat that with a saturated solution of potassium ferrocyanide. As the two chemicals saturate the ink sample, it turns bright blue, proving that iron ions are in the ink. Houston probably wrote the letter with a steel-nibbed pen dipped in a bottle of ink. Because it is handwritten, the writing tells us a great deal about the writer. Because a dip pen starts out full of ink and making very dark lines which progressively lighten as the pen runs out of ink, a scholar can analyze some of Houston's writing patterns. The boldness of Houston's handwriting and signature also has much material to offer for handwriting analysis. Later in the letter's life, a cataloger marked it with an indelible letter V in bright blue ink. Because the entire series of letters from Sam Houston to Anna Regay are marked with similar letters, the V helps establish some of the history of this collection. There are also a few pencil markings, including a cataloger's annotation from the Center for American History, where the document is now housed. Although the paper is now yellow and brittle from the ravages of time, Sam Houston would have originally chosen a beautiful, soft, white paper for writing to the woman he hoped to marry. A faint watermark is visible when we shine a light through the paper. By researching this watermark, a researcher can identify the manufacturer of the paper. An embossed stamp in the corner may help determine some of the letter's history as well. This small stamp at the upper left corner of the folded page was probably made by an early owner of the letters. When Anna Regay first received the letter, it would have been folded and secured with the shiny orange-red sealing wax that is still stuck to the letter. The document is heavily creased along all of the fold lines from being folded and unfolded as Anna and generations of her descendants read and reread it. This use has also caused small tears and holes along the fold lines. When she opened it, she left 3 large holes in the letter. Sadly, the entire lower right corner of the letter has been cut out with scissors. We have no idea who cut this corner out or why they did it. This mystery will never be solved, and the information on that corner of the page will never be recovered. Although this letter was written on good quality paper, Houston would never have realized the damage that the gallic acid used to make the iron gall ink would eventually do to his letter. When Houston wrote this letter, the ink probably appeared a brilliant black against the soft white of the paper. Over time, the ink has faded and the paper has yellowed. More damaging is the reaction of the acid in the ink with the vulnerable paper fibers. In some areas, the ink is actually sinking through the paper. As the process continues, the ink will eventually eat through the letter, leaving only a tattered, unusable remnant. This iron gall ink corrosion is beginning to appear in this ink blot. 2 water stains run in large bands across the top and bottom of the letter. Perhaps the letter was in a flood earlier in its life. These stained areas lead us to believe that the document was soaked in water at some point in its history. This soaking caused the ink to fade and the paper to become brittle and opaque. This contact with water also probably is responsible for the black mold stains on the letter. Because of the mold, we can assume that the letter was wet for at least a few days. Others have recognized that this letter is worth saving. They have tried to care for it and were grateful. Without their intervention, the letter probably would not have survived years of use. To keep the fragile and tearing letter together, a thin layer of silk was applied to one side. Later, the silk began to break, and tape was applied over top of the silk. Both of these were state-of-the-art treatments in the first part of the 20th century. However, previous generations did not realize the damage that would result from the interaction between the paper and the silk. As it ages, silk becomes brittle and can actually weaken the paper it is applied to. The silk and tape interfere with the legibility of the letter as well. Modern conservators collaborate with scientists to ensure that their conservation techniques pose little risk of further damage to the document. We believe that we can repair this document and undo some of the damage caused by previous mends. Conservation treatment is an expensive and time-consuming process. Because of this, we never do treatment without consulting an archivist or curator about the significance of the artifact and how much it is used, or would be used if it was able to be given to patrons. As much as we would like to treat every document that needs help, we don't have the time or money to accomplish it. The Houston letter, however, is significant enough to the collections of the Center for American History, not to mention the state of Texas, that the curator wanted to invest the time in an extensive treatment. Conservation treatment requires skill and patience. A conservator must also think on their feet and handle any unexpected situations that arise. This is particularly likely to happen when we perform the first step of the treatment. To remove the silk and tape, we will immerse the letter in a bath of water. This process will have dual benefits for the document. First, adhesive holding the tape and silk to the letter will soften, allowing them to be removed safely. Second, as the document soaks in the bath, acidic byproducts of the paper's deterioration will be removed from the paper, making it softer, more flexible, and lighter in color. On a chemical level, we can also improve the longevity of the letter. To do this, we will put an alkaline buffer into the paper by immersing it in a bath of water enhanced with calcium ions. Research has shown that as it degrades, paper releases acids that cause further degradation. Putting an alkaline substance like calcium that can neutralize the acid into the paper potentially adds years to its life. Finally, we will mend the tears in the letter and fill the small holes with Japanese paper. After this, the letter will be much safer to handle, and researchers will be able to use it with less chance of causing further damage. The treatment process will be complex, requiring patience, skill, and time from the conservator, but in the end, the improvement to the condition of the letter will be well worth the investment.